Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Peter Crichton. I'm the city manager for the city of Auburn, and I'm the vice chair of the Lewis and Auburn Transit Committee, and the chair of the working group that is holding this meeting today. We start with introductions. So I'm going to start to my immediate left. This gentleman is the chair of the Lewis and Auburn Transit Committee. I'll let you introduce yourself, Dennis, and we'll go right around.
I'm Dennis Dote. As Peter said, I'm the chair of the Lewiston Auburn Transit Committee, but I'm also the deputy city administrator for the city of Lewiston.
Billy Hunter, work for the Auburn School Department, which is also take care of the Auburn School Transportation.
Jim Horn, I work for Auburn School Department. I'm the aspirations coordinator for the school department.
I'm Dawn Hassler. I'm the Vice President of Human Resources for Element Technologies.
Nick Abell, Globe Footwear in Auburn. Harry Simonis, Acting Executive Director for the Central Western Maine Workforce Development Board.
Jennifer Williams, the Transportation Director at AvCog and Director for the Androscoggin Transportation Resource Center, ATRC.
Chad Layton, Regional Director for the Central Maine region for FedCap Rehabilitation Services, partnered with Aspire program. We're located next to the old Goodwill location in Lewiston.
Good morning, I'm Belinda Gary. I'm an LATC member as well as an Auburn City Councilor at Large.
I'm Sherry Wilkins. I'm the manager for the FedCap Lewiston office.
Joy Gould, Workforce Development Director for Community Concepts.
Tina Payton, Associate Director of Transportation Community Concepts.
Joan Walton, Transportation Planner here at AvCog.
Nicholas Hamill, Dean of Students at Central Maine Community College.
Sandy Buchanan, General Manager, Western Maine Transportation Services, Operator of CityLink, Brunswick Explorer, Lisbon Connection, Sugarloaf Explorer, and Mountain Explorer.
Rhonda Corson, I'm the Manager of Human Resources at Modula. We're a manufacturing plant in Lewiston.
Mindy Gervais, HR at Boston Brands of Maine.
Jolene Beam, I'm a member of the LATC committee and also on the Lewiston City Council.
Stephen Martelli, Concerned Citizen.
Kristen Cloutier, President of Lewiston City Council.
Becky Conrad with the LA Metro Chamber of Commerce.
Jody Durisco, I'm an LATC board member and the executive assistant to the city manager for Auburn.
Marsha Bennett, I'm the transit coordinator at AvCog and the staff person to the Lewiston Auburn Transit Committee.
Carrie Robichaud, program assistant at AvCog.
Very good. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. We're going to meet probably for an hour and a half, and we have an agenda. Hopefully everyone has the agenda in front of them. If you don't, raise your hand. We'll get it to you. I want to thank AvCog for hosting the meetings on behalf of Dennis and the LATC. We appreciate that, and Marcia for her support, and Carrie for taking the notes today, and Phil, thank you for taping the meeting for Great Falls TV. I want to thank Jody Durisco for her assistance as well, putting the agenda together and preparing for the meeting today. I'm going to give you a little background first in terms of why we've asked you to come today. And because Dennis is here, if Dennis would like to make some comments, I certainly would welcome that. The Lewis and Auburn Transit Committee is looking at whether there's a new model that we could create to make the transit system even more vibrant than it is today. And we recognize that we need to reach out to the business community. And there are a number of issues that we're all facing in terms of the aging population and workforce development and the importance of having a successful transit system. Hopefully today we'll have comments from you that will be helpful to us as we move ahead and to the LATC board in looking at what we need to be doing in the future. I think that transit is important, and it's more than, I think, a social service system for people. It's also important to economic development. And there is the reason why we need to have the conversation today. And we'd like to know what everybody thinks, what your thoughts are, what you think about the system, how it could better meet your needs, and some of the issues that maybe you're thinking about. It's important for us to hear from you today. Before we move on with the agenda, I want to see if Dennis has any comments. I didn't ask him to make comments, so I know Dennis is always capable of being able to speak at meetings. Any thoughts that you have?
I'm not usually lost for words, but just, simply thank you all for taking the time. The information, feedback that you provide today is critical for our working group, really to come back with a recommendation to the larger LATC committee, as well as being able to bring recommendations back to both communities, Lewiston and Auburn, that I guess technically own the LATC system. So just really appreciate it, and I look forward to the discussion.
Very good. So moving on to the discussion points for the meeting then. First item is workforce development. And we hear that word all the time. There's hardly a meeting I go to these days where workforce development is not mentioned. The first question is the current transit system meeting the needs of the workforce? And then the next one is what is working, what isn't, and then identify needs, expansion of service, route or schedule changes. I'd like to see what people's thoughts are. We'd like to hear what your thoughts are on this particular area of need that we have as a community. Anyone who would like to share some thoughts? Go ahead, Steve.
Being a person that's ridden this system since approximately 2002, and I ride it 4 to 6 times a week, I find that the comments coming back to me are that the start times are not early enough and late enough for the finish times, so that the people can get to and from work or college. There were some people up on Cook Street that were taking a bus on the early run, and because of the schedule change, what was it, about 2 years ago when they cut back, they weren't able to get to school, so they had to go by other means. So we lose out on passengers that way.
Anyone else who has any thoughts? Yes?
Similar to what he is saying, one of the points I wanted to make was the time also. We'd like to have an earlier bus. We work 3 shifts, and one of our shifts starts at 4:45 a.m. We have a huge amount of people that take the bus. So that was one of my points I wanted to bring up too, earlier start time and later end time.
Mindy, when you say a huge number of people that take the bus, how many people is that?
I want to say we have a very large temporary workforce, and I want to say the majority of them. I would say, if I had to pick a number, 60 to 100.
Really?
I don't really know, but I know a lot of the temporary workforce that I talk to take the bus, and if they cannot make that 4:45 a.m. Shift because of that.
And I'll just jump right in there too. I also agree. We right now are only running 2 shifts, but are going to expand to 3. And the start time just isn't early enough. And it would be nice if it ran a little later as well.
Okay. Any other comments? Yes.
I would agree with all 3 of these folks. For Element Technologies, our first shift doesn't start until 7. But if you look at the schedule, if somebody's across town or even, from Lisbon Street up around on Sabata Street, they can't get there in time for the 7 o'clock start. And the schedule as it is currently only allows for somebody to use the bus transportation system for first shift opening, and we run 3 shifts. So if it, ran earlier and later, it could encompass both our first and, well, actually, if it ran into the, where a second shifter could get to work, or get home from work, a third shifter could get to work, and so we would cover all 3 shifts.
Can I just ask, I want to get the shift times, just for information. So when do they start?
The majority of our shifts, it runs 7 to 3, 3 to 11, and 11 to 7.
Okay. What about at Boston?
We have those. We also have a couple of additional ones. So we have a first shift that starts at 4:45 a.m. and that runs through 3 o'clock. And then our second shift, we have a 3 to 11. We also have a 3:30 to midnight. And then third shift is always 11 to 7. Except for Sundays, I'm sorry. Sundays they come at 9:45. Yeah. And there's no Sunday bus.
There's no Sunday bus.
Yeah, we run 24/7, so we have 12-hour weekend shifts that run 5 to 5, Saturday and Sunday. And we've got some day shift also. I mean, it's a very small group, but that it runs 5 to 3.
We're just designing our shifts. We have a regular first shift, which right now is anywhere from 4 a.m. in the morning start time to 7 a.m. We are running an off second shift right now that's just 3:30 in the afternoon to 3:30 in the morning, 3 days a week, but we're going to move into more of the 7 to 3, 3 to 11, 11 to 7 mode. That's what we want to get to.
How many of your employees depend on the bus?
Right now, not a lot because it's not a stop there,
Yeah.
but I do have a lot of ride share folks that get rides with family members, girlfriends, or the guys come in together. That's the problem if one guy's sick, both guys are out of work, so we run into a lot of that. And the fact that we're expanding a lot, we're going to need to bring a lot more folks in, and I don't see that problem shrinking.
In your case?
I think for us, I'm not aware of a huge amount of ridership right now, but to the same point, the bus doesn't come out as far as our business. It comes fairly close.
Right.
But there's no convenient stop there. But like all employers, we're struggling to hire, and we're delving into kind of alternative sourcing, which means specifically we've hired a number of immigrant folks who don't have vehicles. So to continue that trend and to be able to put those people to work, they need to be able to get to work.
Right.
And that's our concern.
Yeah, and we're exactly the same. We have a number of immigrants now. We're partnering with NTI to train some more folks to hire. We work with FedCap. So yeah, we have that same problem.
Any other thoughts? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, and we're very gracious for the business community that takes on our participants. And I guess I would echo the start times, obviously, the availability. 50% or more of our participants are new Mainers. And we have a caseload of roughly 450 to 500 participants at our center. Majority of them rely heavily on public transportation. I would say at any given day, correct me if I'm wrong, Sherry, maybe 80, 90, 100 participants could walk through our door for workshops, and our goal is to connect them with some of the employers. And I understand there isn't that many access to transportation routes to like Dingley Press and some of the other employers here in Auburn. So some of those connections would be helpful.
Anyone else?
I would say that Marcia was wonderful about having the bus. We have such heavy ridership that she had the bus, instead of dropping off on Lisbon Street, come down into the parking lot, and in front of the FedCap doors it opens and releases. So I wanted to thank you for that, because that in and of itself is just much more welcoming and invites people to come to FedCap. One thing that people aren't talking about is the daycare stop as well. So you have the parent who has to get to work even if it's at 8 o'clock. If they have to take their child on the bus to the daycare, they depart, then they have to walk their child into daycare. The bus takes off, and then they have to wait 1 hour for the next bus to come along. And I don't think anybody thinks about that delivery of that child to their safe spot. And I think Marcia and Sandy were talking to us about building in some like wait times. So in the route that there are pullover moments where they wait 4 or 5 minutes and then carry on. And that would perhaps be in front of some of the larger daycares like Pet and Gill Academy and Leavers and the YWCA, YMCA, so that parents then don't add that hour onto their commute both ways.
Anyone else?
The other thing else I would add is just extend the hours also on Saturdays would be a huge help. And we have a lot of people that also take cabs, and I think if there was better transportation, public, if they could take the bus, I think there would be a lot less cabs coming in and out of our parking lot.
Yeah, we have that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that can be expensive for your workers, my goodness.
Before we move on to the next category, anybody who has any other thoughts they want to share having to do with workforce development? Becky, not to put you on the spot, but I know that you're spending a lot of time trying to address that issue. Do you have any thoughts?
Just to say this conversation is very timely and very needed, and the solutions are needed too. So, I mean, I know some folks who worked at FedCap have shared with me that, you know, they've actually ridden the route to understand from the rider's perspective, is it working? And this is a big, big, big piece of the equation that we can solve as a community. So I hope we can come out of this with some real new ideas to make. I know we have limited resources, but let's get folks to work and let's get their kids safe to daycare. It will make this business community very happy because I'm thrilled that there's 3 or 4 big employers here, but there's 10 or 15 standing behind all of you saying the same thing. So you can just, you know, multiply this on the notes because it's a universal need.
And one other aspect of that is, I have only been in Maine for a little over a year. I'm not completely familiar with the program, but if we could somehow work with LAPC to subsidize bus passes, because again, a lot of the folks we're hiring are immigrants or were very underemployed, and the extra expense of riding the bus, you know, if there's any way we can partner with you guys to help subsidize that, make it easier on our folks to get in.
Stephen, you had your hand up.
Something that goes along with new people coming to this area, and that is the simplicity of being able to read the schedule. People are not able to figure out how to get from point A to point B. Making that schedule easier to read would be a big help.
Anyone else before we move on to the next category? Sandy?
If we could capture the start times and approximate ridership for each of those, anticipated ridership for each of those start times and end times, it would be very helpful in creating routes, not only here in the urban area, but for rural to connect with those routes as well.
And back to the chamber, I would echo that. I also understand kind of being the bridge between many of these kinds of conversations. We can help the employers understand their responsibility in this too, around kind of making riding. If we bring the bus, let's make sure we have some sort of programs in the business to help people learn how to use it and promote using it, and let's make it a community-wide thing to ride a bus. So I don't want the transit committee to feel, at least from my perspective, that it's all on your shoulders to solve the problem, and then if people don't use it, then where are we? Let's approach this from a holistic perspective. I'm happy. Transit's actually, you're coming to speak to the chamber breakfast, I believe, in January.
Probably my community relations person.
Okay. Someone's coming. And, you know, let's use that platform for kind of you know, as a community, we're addressing this, and we can put the call out to the business community to be part of the solution.
And to piggyback on that, I don't know if the Transportation Commission Committee knows this, but at FedCap, we have a program where we have people take our new Mainers on the bus, and they do a bus ride. So it is like a guided trip, and if that's a model that the larger companies want to adopt, It is always well received. It's greatly appreciated. And both Sandy and Marcia helped us develop, we call it the Bus Ambassador Program.
It's a nice idea, I wasn't aware of that.
We're innovators over there. And we try to make sure that the ambassadors are speakers of other languages.
Very good. Well, let's move to the next category. The next one is titled Strengthening Partnerships. Exploring opportunities, and what I mean by that is the potential of maybe having an advisory group to the LATC from the business community that could help advise us in terms of what we're doing. This is not something that we've had in the past. I think it could be beneficial to us. Also, are there any businesses or employers here or maybe who aren't present that would have an interest in maybe participating in a funding role to help fund the system in some manner? And also in terms of bus passes, you were talking about the subsidy, maybe sharing the subsidy or doing something like that. I think we have to be creative. And then any other thoughts or ideas that people may have along these lines, we'd like to hear from folks. So who would like to start with comments regarding strengthening partnerships? Does any of this sound reasonable? How would you like to participate? Thinking of the employers primarily, but we also have other groups and entities that are here as well, like Community Concepts and FedCamp.
Peter, I may be the only one that needs this information, but could you do a 2 or 3 minute summary of kind of the status of this system now and its challenges and its strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats?
Did you say 2 or 3 minutes?
I did. If everybody else knows it, maybe, I mean.
No,
I would love to hear that as well, that means.
I will do that, and I'll ask Dennis for his thoughts as well, and Marcia, who's the director of the program, if she cares to. Right now, I think the system is challenged financially. And I think the cities are looking at what their role should be. No particular order of importance. I think 3 years ago or so, City Council in Auburn decided that they didn't want to fund the system at the same level as Lewiston has been. I don't know all of the history to that. I think some of that might have been the feeling that maybe the routes were not meeting the needs of citizens in Auburn, or that the city should not be participating at the same level as Lewiston. We always have that kind of discussion that takes place. I think right now, as you know, in my position as city manager of Auburn, I would like to see us really look at this with a fresh look in terms of the transit system and the community. When I say community, I'm talking about Lewiston, Auburn, and what we can do to meet the needs of the community. I think the reason for the working group is to look at what are some changes, improvements that we could make to the system that would be helpful. We've also been challenged by a decrease in federal funding. Marcia can talk about that better than I can, but there's a formula that the feds use. The feds always have a formula. Doesn't necessarily mean we can make sense out of it, but they have a formula, and based on that formula, there was a reduction in funding for the system, which actually happened prior to the decision by the Auburn City Council to reduce funding. So you've got the issue with the feds and the stress on the system because of lack of federal funding. Then you've got the question of the funding from the 2 cities. I plan on recommending that the City Council restore the funding but at the same time, I want to look at the routes and make sure that the routes are meeting the needs of both cities. I think that's a fair and reasonable request. And some of the things that we heard today, I think we need to look at what we could do to try and meet those needs. This is, you hear people say that this is a critical time, and this is a crisis we need to address. This is a pivotal time. I think this is a really critical time for the system. And I see this as an opportunity at the same time to try and really look at things anew and how we can do things differently and do things better. At this point, I guess what I'd like to do is see if Dennis has any additional thoughts he'd like to add as the chair of the LATC, and also Marcia as the person who has to direct the system.
I don't have really anything to add. I think Peter summed it up well. I mean, we are at a time where we need to be. We've been talking, I think the LATC committee has been having these discussions maybe at a higher level for quite some time now, and I think we've all recognized the need to make these changes and take active steps. So the working group is certainly taking the lead on that, and we appreciate that. It allows the committee to continue to work on the day-to-day issues and business of the bus system while putting some focus on really truly finding ways to improve it. So I think you've summed it up perfectly. I don't have anything really to add. I think beyond that, financial, there's no question finances are always going to come into an issue when you're looking to expand. I don't think anybody can hide that, and certainly our history of losing federal funding and that has created some certain challenges for us to maintain what we have, knowing that what we have isn't enough. We've certainly heard that today. So I think that we've got to keep moving forward to keep getting creative and finding ways to make this better.
Question?
Yes.
Do we have, like a graphic of what the ridership is? I mean, is it heavily on each end of the schedule for people going and coming to work, or is there a large use of the bus in the middle of the day?
We do have data on that, and Marcia, maybe off the top of your head, you can answer some of those questions better than Dennis or I can.
Well, actually, I wish I could. We're able to start looking at that information now because Western Maine Transportation, as the operator, they've just started they're helping the transit committee out with being able to collect on-off data. So the tablets that they have on board, we're actually getting that count now, that information of all the trip runs. It compiles it. We do have it in a paper format that we could go back and look for, but now it's easier to collect that information on we could go look right now and see what ridership has been for the morning and see where the peaks are. So we'd be able to look at that information. Just some of the comments that I'm hearing here, the start time, we do get a lot of commuters first thing in the morning, so you will see pretty good ridership first thing in the morning, and it's typically morning and then late afternoon.
Well, because that was my assumption, but again, I'm a non-user of the system. I made that assumption, and I wondered, as a cost savings, if you're trying to expand to help people get to and from work, could you decrease services in the middle of the day? People get where they need to be. Even if you've gone shopping, you're usually shopping for a couple of hours. Is there a way to?
There's challenges with that because of the hospitality and the service sector. You don't know when people are starting their jobs at stores, at restaurants. So it's trying to. There's so many start times and end times to people's shifts that it's hard to identify the best time. Listening to this, it sounds like this is commuter trips first thing in the morning. Nobody's going to go shopping at 4:45 a.m. You're going to work. So it's trying to maybe address how we can meet those needs and not necessarily run all the buses at that time. Just figure out how we can address those needs and to make sure we're going to the right areas. The bus system, we definitely are missing going to some of the industrial areas, but it's knowing when we should be out there. We probably don't need to run the bus out towards the airport all day, at this time, until we start having, things happening at the airport, but, there's businesses out there that have start times. Maybe we should be looking at those more.
Marcia, any additional thoughts that you want to add?
I'll just say that I've been working with the transit committee for a long years now, and it's been challenging. The system is heavily dependent on support from both city councils. You get the federal funding that comes in from Federal Transit Administration that funds the bulk of the system, and then the communities pick up whatever deficit is left. There's this huge formula you have to work through. This system in Lewiston and Auburn, the communities have only matched what they're getting in federal funds. They've never provided they've never overmatched the federal funds. So it's like our system has been limited by how much federal funds we've been getting, as opposed to what does the community really need for a good transit system. You need to look at the system, what really needs to be built, and then figure out how to fund it from there. Because if you have a system with holes in it, if you have a system that takes too long, it takes an hour and a half before you get from your origin to your destination, then people aren't going to use it. So right there, your system isn't going to work properly. So it's always been that funding issue that I think that the communities have had. And the transit committee has been making changes. We never used to have Saturday service. That got brought on 5 or 6 years ago, I think. So, the committee has been, and the communities have supported making changes. When I first started, this bus went from 6 a.m. to 8:30. Then it stopped running, and it started running at noontime to 5. So the transit committee filled in that morning gap. So they've been making the changes, and slowly improving the system. And you can see when the improvements have been made, more people rode the bus, more trips were made. So it makes sense. You have a better system, it meets the needs of the people, more people are going to ride. So we just had a little setback with some funding cuts in the past couple of years, so hopefully we can fix those and keep moving forward.
What could we as the business community do to help influence the councils to fund you properly?
I can tell you. I feel, so I'm in my 3rd term, I'm serving my 5th year on the council. We get a lovely presentation from Marcia every year. And I feel like what we keep hearing about is ridership numbers, and I think we have a lot of councilors who see an empty bus and think that there's nobody riding the bus. And so I think somehow we have to figure out how we're formulating that story in a better way, because it's not coming across. But the other thing that I feel like I have not actually heard from actual employers in those 5 years about what your needs are and how your needs are not being met. And I think that that's an important story to tell counselors, because whether we like it or not, I think that we tend to put more stock in what businesses are telling us than what actual riders are telling us. And especially when we're talking about funding and whether we're going to put money towards those things. So writing a letter, coming to a council meeting when we're talking about this stuff during budget time, I think are important additions that could happen. The other thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about, and I realize this is an LATC meeting, but when we're talking about partnerships, one of my roles as a counselor is on the Androscoggin County Budget Committee. And for the first time, I think in 4 years, a proposal to partner with Western Maine Transportation Services has actually made it into the budget. Whether or not that gets funded is up in the air, and so I think that if we're talking about a more regionalized effort to provide transportation services, and businesses think that that's important to them in terms of getting folks from Lisbon or Sabattis to businesses in Lewiston Auburn to fill the jobs that are available, then we could use your help in making that case as well. So.
Yes, Councilor Gary.
The system we have today was good in the past. It was built around the transportation needs of the businesses that were in existence back then. As they got phased out, the routes pretty much stayed the same. There was only minor changes. Today's routes don't meet today's needs, and with the funding cuts, the timing and everything is totally off. So it's a dysfunctional system. We're here today to plan and find ways to make the current system better and to transition it into the best system we can have to meet the needs of the businesses that are located outside of the current zones that we have traditionally thought where the business areas are. It will be great for you guys, excuse me, I gotta try to watch my proper English. It would be great for all these businesses that are in the room today, as well as those that were invited that aren't here today for whatever reason, to talk to the counselors and say there's support, that you're behind us and you want us to fully fund the transit service, as fully as we can. But we have limited dollars. We need you guys, sorry again, we need all of you that are in this room and outside to partner with us and show that the transit system is important to you and to your employees, to your businesses, and that you're willing, I'm not going to mince words, we need you guys to kick in some money. We need you to help us to redesign the routes. We may be able to, we can't shortchange the ridership we have today, because a lot of them aren't going to go to your businesses to work. They may go to your businesses to get services, to buy products, and to meet, those type of needs. But we also got a lot of senior population and physically challenged people that ride our service. And we got to be careful, because if we cut routes on one section, our ADA transport can't go in those sections because of the boundaries of how they operate. So we have to be mindful to encompass everybody. But there is ways, if we do have the funding, that we don't have to do all routes, but maybe we can do pod location pickups, depending on whatever businesses need the buses to go to them, instead of hitting every side streets within Lewiston and Auburn. We can do pod locations, do pickup, and if one bus isn't enough, hopefully not, we can have a backup bus that will do it. So then it's a win-win. It's a win for all Auburn and Lewiston residents. It's a win-win for all the businesses that will come to the table and work. We need to fix the inner system that's dysfunctional before we can hook into Western Maine, and they're kindly trying to pull in businesses and people from outside, because what good is it for them to pull them in to us if they can't get where they gotta go in a timely manner? There's no place for them to go, and there's no real business because the shifts are at weird hours. So we've all got to work together so that all the pieces are together, and it's not, and we need to do it now. I mean, I know it's not going to happen overnight, but we need to do it now in order for it to happen. We'll be starting our budget sessions shortly. I mean, the different committees are now being, looking at their budgets. We just put one budget to bed, but we're always looking ahead for the future. So please, figure out what your needs are. Join this working committee that the good vice chair and the chair of this meeting has said. Help us come up with solutions. Propose your ideas. We're willing to come up with it. I mean, if you want, we'll figure out ways to do your bus tickets. We'll figure out possible hours for shifts. We'll work with our company that's in charge of running our transit. So she can, or they can hire the drivers and build the routes so that we can do what we need to do to meet your needs as well as our needs.
Thank you. Councilman Beam, I don't want to leave you out of this discussion if you want to add anything.
Well, I think everything's been said very eloquently, and I really reiterate that the councils, excuse me, and some councilors especially need to hear from businesses that there is a pressing need for better bus transportation. Because I don't think that's something that is just widely known. If you have a car and you can get around, you're all set, or if you're not disabled, but it just needs to be reiterated that some people just absolutely rely on transportation, and both cities, Auburn and Lewiston, are trying to attract businesses and to help businesses expand, and that I can't think of, well, yes, I can think of many ways we can do that, but to make it a good place for businesses, but having happy employees who get to work on time and can get home after work is important. So please communicate with your councils. I think everybody said it, but please be said again.
To put the funding into context, and Marcia, correct me if I'm wrong about this, but at this point for the FY19 budget, the city of Lewiston is contributing $256,545, and the city of Auburn is contributing $199,130. And that's what we're putting into the system, and the feds are contributing the majority of the funding.
Correct.
On top of that. And I think in comparison to other transit systems in the state, right or wrong, what the cities are contributing is probably lower than the other communities that have transit systems.
That is very correct.
So there's a challenge for us. And the business community absolutely needs to be at the table, need to be part of the conversation. It's important to have your voice heard, as you've already heard from counselors here. In terms of your participation, I'm thinking of the business community specifically, but you also have the FedCap, which certainly plays a key role, and then you have community concepts and other entities. How many of you, and maybe you want to think about this, would have an interest in being on an advisory group to the LATC? Raise your hand. Thank you. If you could, Carrie, get their names. Mindy, Rhonda, Tina, Joy, Sherry, Nick. Can't see your nameplate, Nick. That would be great, and then maybe, hopefully, we can get others to participate as well. We are having a meeting tomorrow on the LATC board where we're going to be talking about this meeting and next steps, and we'll talk about how do we involve the advisory group in the appropriate way and what your expectations might be. And in terms of what you would expect, if you were on an advisory group to the LATC, what would you expect from that? How often would you want to meet? What kind of participation would you want to have? How would you want to be involved? Any thoughts on that?
Quarterly to start?
Quarterly?
Maybe till we get it figured out a little more frequent, and then once
Okay.
we're running,
Then quarterly?
then quarterly.
Okay. All right.
I think it's important for the advisory board to just give the LATC some anecdotal evidence. I think it's important for you to hear from the people, the riders, or from the agencies and businesses who see, so many riders, and kind of so you can get a feel for the impact of the decisions.
And I think even for the employers who don't have the bandwidth to be on an advisory committee, if you could go back and survey your employees around whether or not this meets their needs. From an HR benefit perspective, just how many of your employees are currently riding the bus? How many of your employees would like to ride the bus but don't? Would something, I moved here from Boston, my employer provided subsidized passes as a benefit and as a recruitment tool. If that would be something that you all would think about, and not necessarily participating in meetings, but really coming back with the hard data would also be another way to be involved.
I think that's a very interesting thing to use as a recruitment tool, because we need everything we can use right now to find folks and get them in. So that would be a nice little thing to add to the package.
How about asking if they'll be willing to walk a minimum of a block or two to catch a ride? Because we can't possibly do curb service.
I just need a suggestion that as we're talking about this advisory group, instead of having the employers come forward and be the voice of the employees, maybe it makes sense to include some employees who are using the bus service on the advisory group.
Or some that would like to.
I tend to think that, while we all may feel like we have people's best intentions, unless they're at the table sort of helping us form policy and routes and talk about changes, there are things that, unless you are a rider of the bus, that you would not think to bring forward as a concern.
That's a good point. Well, thank you for your comments on that and your willingness and readiness to help out and participate. It is a work in progress, obviously. What are people's thoughts on next steps? What would you like to see happen next?
I liked Elsie's, is it Elsie?
Me and Belinda.
Oh, Belinda, sorry, Belinda. I liked Belinda's suggestion about surveying.
Yeah.
I think if there were, a very simple survey created that agencies and companies could take back to their employees, it serves two purposes. It gives you hard data, and it makes people feel like they matter. So I think that's, I think that would be a really good first step.
Okay. Any other thoughts on next steps? We've got the LATC meeting tomorrow. The working group will meet again, to talk about this meeting. The next scheduled LATC board meeting is in early October. So we will obviously have conversations about what we heard today and what we'd like to be doing in terms of the survey and setting up the advisory committee, advisory group, and other suggestions that people may have. Any other thoughts on next steps? Dennis, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think you just outlined it, and I know our intent was to get some feedback from everyone today, and the working group is, as Peter mentioned, is working tomorrow to pull all this together in preparation for our larger LATC committee meeting. So we have a lot of members here represented, which is nice, but we still are missing some. So I think we need to have that discussion of the outcomes of this meeting and really share some of this very valuable feedback. It's honestly been a very good discussion. So I think from there, that would be my appropriate next steps for us as a committee. But I think the working group, that from your perspective.
No, I think That sounds good to me. All right, is there anything else anybody would like to add? I said an hour and a half, but you know what? If you can finish your meeting in an hour or less, there's
So if we
nothing wrong with
did a
that.
survey with our employees and temp workers who uses the bus, who would like to use the bus,
Yeah.
maybe what time frame they'd be looking at, that sort of
Right.
thing, who would you send that information to?
Well, I think, I'll send it to Marcia, but I probably want to develop the survey. We'll talk about that as an LATC board, and we've got your email addresses now.
Okay, so you'd be developing the survey?
We can develop the survey.
Actually, I was thinking of two surveys, an employer survey and an employee survey.
Okay.
That way we get information about
That's excellent.
shifts and, just
Yeah.
what the employer sees as some of their needs. So it's trying to figure out what we really want to
Right.
get, so.
And we want to make sure that you're all asking the same questions. So if we develop the survey or
Right.
surveys, then we have that consistency for analyzing the data.
And we'll do a draft. We'll send you out the draft so you can look at the draft, and if you have suggestions or thoughts on how to improve it, we definitely do that. And we'll finalize it and get it out.
So one more thing, we're sort of coming back to the Androscoggin County budget stuff and the Western Maine Transportation and Regionalization efforts. Is everyone here okay if I send the information to Dennis to share with this group about when those budget meetings are happening, and then if people want to lend their support, they can? That'd be great.
Just on that note, just so everybody in the room has a little understanding, especially if you are looking for employers, it's not happening overnight, but it's moving fast. If Sandy could just mention what they're
Sure.
what they're working on, because I think that's
Yeah.
pretty big from a regional perspective.
So, as Marcia mentioned, she's the operator, they operate services in the urban area. We just happen to be the contracted operator of an urban service. Our start was in rural transportation, which has changed, and we did a study last year, which is helping us create routes to help people for employment and educational. That's a big focus. Anybody can use the service. But in the coming year, we are going to be rolling out a number of different services. The first that will begin in November is Sugarloaf Express, which has nothing to do with the urban people here, but it is a model that we started with getting people from the Farmington area to Sugarloaf for employment opportunities. So that is going to also expand next year to, in December, we will be starting 2 routes for what you call the Mountain Express, Power Mountain Explorer, getting people to work for Sunday River. One bus will be originating down here in Lewiston, Auburn, going to Sunday River 7 days a week, 2 trips a day. And the other one will be from Munford, Mexico to Sunday River. Shortly after that, we are going to start with trial runs for commuter routes that will be coming down Route 4 from the Farmington-Wilton area into Lewiston, Auburn. And that's the one that we are really hoping that we can work closely with the CityLink service now so that we can make quicker turnarounds going back out to the urban area. We can get people in at appropriate times for work and education, going both ways. Because there's some people that want to go up to University of Maine. Farmington is one of them that we've heard. And then later on, hopefully, the March to June, we'll start our trial runs for Lewiston, Auburn to Brunswick, the area.
Exciting. And I think the amount of funding that is being asked from Androscoggin County is around 42,000 or so, is that right?
45.
Yeah, so,
And there's a federal match
right,
on that as well. So.
right. And is this the 3rd or 4th year that you've gone to them?
I believe third, yes.
3rd year, so. And it's good that it's made it through this process so far. Now will be the budget committee that will be reviewing it.
Yes, and we are advisory only, but,
Yeah.
so,
Okay.
but then it goes back to the actual commission.
All right. Okay. Anything else anybody wants to add?
I just
Yes, go ahead, Joy.
In terms of the surveys, community concepts could survey our own employees, but also the participants we serve. We serve over 1,000 families in the Lewiston, Auburn, kind of greater Androscoggin area. So we could send that out to our community members as well, if that would be helpful.
I think that would be great, myself. Yeah. Yes,
So maybe there's 3 surveys.
could be. That's all right,
I'm
you
sure you're
know.
looking for things to do, Martha.
In fact, you
I'm
know,
starting to get a little bored.
both cities, and you know, we have websites, we could put something up on websites as well. I mean, we'll talk about this more and discuss what makes sense. I was gonna ask Jim Horn if he wanted to say anything, but he took off on me, so. Anybody who has any final comments or last words that you'd like to share? We will be in touch with you. Thank you very much for. Go ahead.
I gotta believe, you know, in the concept of a survey, that the career centers would be pivotal to that. I mean, because the career centers are trying to help people get to work.
Right.
And so understanding what their, you know, constituents need would be
Right.
critical.
Yes. Very good point. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.